Welcome back to the show. We're about to learn the secret sauce. Excellent. Omoju.
Hey.
I am super happy to have you here having a conversation. I'm a big fan of your work and what you did at GitHub. We worked at GitHub at the same time, no longer work at GitHub. And do you want to introduce yourself to the audience of what you do, who you are?
My name is Omoju Miller. I am the CEO of a startup called Fimio, and we work in the data space. Initially, we started working with Web3 because my thesis initially was Web3 needed lots of security tools for developers. And my area of expertise is machine learning. And I knew that Ethereum, the ecosystem, had majority of the smart contracts. So it felt like we should build some security tools around the programming language Solidity. We built it, we shipped it. Unfortunately, the market is kind of like shifting underneath us.
Yeah.
And there are not that many active developers. So we're in the middle of a pivot, and we're pivoting into something else around data as well. And we're beginning to look into all kinds of different things. One of the areas that truly interests me is end-to-end debugging of applications in production. It's basically distributed systems.
Yeah.
Like, how do you actually do that? It's very difficult, almost virtually impossible. And then even in thinking through all of that kind of stuff, something else that's coming up is data provenance and data lineage. All of these things are basically the same kind of thing. It's basically tracing the path of something through a very complex system.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm doing now.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to following that journey. But I wanted to actually start from earlier days, Omoju. I know you'd spent some time, you're a PhD candidate.
I got a PhD.
Oh, you got a PhD. Okay.
Yes, I did.
At Berkeley?
Yep.
Okay. So what's the background that you led into working machine learning and data?
My undergraduate degree is in computer science, and I got really in love with artificial intelligence, the idea.
Was that also at Berkeley?
No, well, this was not at Berkeley. This was at University of Memphis.
Okay.
Years and years and years ago. And so it was basically like symbolic systems. And I really got into it, but it was too early. It didn't have like a commercial application outside of like the military defense complex.
Yeah.
So it was like you get expertise in something it's pretty much going nowhere. And in the intervening years of doing that work, I became a stay-at-home mom. I stayed at home with my son for 4 years. And in those intervening 4 years, the world shifted. The iPhone was launched. We now had ubiquitous data. We had Google Summer of Code. Python became like a real language with lots of packages. And then most importantly, search, Google search really won the search space. So statistical based approaches to symbolic systems were the thing that was winning the day. Probabilistic statistic based systems versus what we were doing. And so it was very clear to me that, all right, I guess I actually now can go back because the things I'm interested in actually have a commercial application now. So I came to Berkeley, UC Berkeley, to do almost like a cognitive science PhD, how people reason about technical material. I did it in the graduate division. It was a computer science education PhD between the education department and the computer science department. I did all that. And if you really want to know how people reason about technical material, the person with the largest data set is a company called GitHub. They have the largest data set of how people actually actively work in the technical spaces and learn technical material. And so it was very clear to me that if I'm really serious about that kind of work, I should probably go work at GitHub. And I went to GitHub and was part of the founding ML team, the machine learning team.
Yeah. What year was this?
2017.
Okay.
So the founding ML team, the previous CEO of GitHub, defunct.
Yes.
At the previous year, during GitHub Universe, they said he went rogue on his keynote and started talking about ML and AI and how they should use those systems and their data to build interesting things on the platform, which is what led to them creating an ML team. And it worked out perfectly. I joined that ML team. We built recommendation engines. We built few things here and there. But it was so new that it was like an uphill battle of actually trying to get ML into the systems because people didn't think about it at all.
Yeah.
They were just doing like pull requests or something like that. And then we started doing this research project. Hamal Hussein, who was a colleague of mine at the time, semantic search. It was like using natural language to search for functions. Or natural language, like, oh, if I could say this. could Python write me a function? So doing all this research, and it kind of like, this model seemed to work a little bit. And so we released that as an experiment in one of these GitHub universes. And one thing led to the other. I shifted roles from being the ML person to being the technical advisor to the CEO, who was then Nat Friedman.
Yeah.
And Nat was very ML savvy. So I guess that was makes sense why, I was technical advisor.
And now he's like super into AI at this point.
Super into AI, is very ML savvy. And so one of the things that we ended up doing was that work with OpenAI and Microsoft, and actually like collaborating GitHub, Microsoft, OpenAI to bring GitHub Copilot, which is basically like truly advanced semantic-based search, natural language search. Copilot was a fantastic success. It was one of the first LLMs that actually proved its utility.
Yeah.
And then OpenAI, like everybody's using ChatGPT. Turns out that it wasn't just, Copilot is amazing, but it's a developer tool. The average person is not going to use it. If you're not a developer, you don't need to do natural language search. If you put that same model in a chat environment, anybody can then use it. We all used to chat. And the thing took off like a rocket.
Yeah. Do you think Copilot, its success, helped the sort of wave of new? Because like I was at GitHub during the Copilot launch. I knew of OpenAI, but it was like, I kept seeing all these ML things that everyone tried. It was like cool little party tricks or cool things that you could show. One of the things I would show all the time is when you go to any GitHub repo and you go /contribute, there's a whole blog post about this, but it shows good first issues and documentation. And it's not just about just the one label, but it can give you an onboard ramp. And that was ML powered.
Yep.
And like we would ship things like that at GitHub, and then like we'd move on to the next thing.
Yeah, there wasn't like, the challenge was you'd ship things, but there wasn't a product manager whose job was, there wasn't an ML product manager. And now I'm sitting in the role of a CEO that I do product, that I also lead engineering. You need a product manager to drive that product to its fullest extent. And it's also non-trivial to create ML product managers. ML is still relatively new, even though it's been around forever, but commercially, only a few companies were really, really building ML. So what does it mean to be a product manager? So I think it was just so new, people just did not understand.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating because like there is even like were you part of the GitHub trending stuff?
Yes.
So like what's the story behind the GitHub trending? Because I feel like there's no innovation since it shipped. Like it just sort of exists.
So, I mean, I think trending has been around before the ML team even came about.
Yeah.
It's just like whatever was trending right now. It's a simple query type system. But even so, it's knowledge discovery. Like you got all this stuff. You want to know what's really hot. What are people using? And I think initially it was based on stars.
Yeah.
Which we all know is not enough of an indicator, but it gives you some kind of signal. And whether stars are good as a signal or not is irrelevant, because trending became a thing that changed people's lives.
Yeah.
If you trended on GitHub, you could write your career check.
Yeah.
And so then we wanted to actually do it better. There was a Nigerian developer that I got to know, a Unicode developer. He has a real name, but Prosper.
Prosper, yes.
Prosper was doing this Laravel stuff, and all of a sudden he built this Laravel thing and started trending, and like, whoa, I think it was one of the first things that you saw that the Nigerian developer ecosystem is really like punching above his weight.
Oh, yeah.
And so you're seeing all this, and we were like, would it make sense if you could even refine it so you could search by country, you could search by language, you could search by this, you could search by that. And then we built and shipped that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just met Prosper for the first time in person in Nigeria for the Oscar Fest.
Oh, you went to Oscar Fest?
Yes, yeah.
Nice.
I was one of me, Angie Jones, and a few others keynoted. And Prosper, I got to hear his story. Because of Laravel, I'm not in Laravel, so I didn't know who Prosper was. I knew Unicode developer and folks inviting him to speak other places. But now he's like working on Novu. He has a whole ecosystem around him, other developers who are growing.
Yep.
Up and like the time during Nat Friedman at GitHub, like we spent some investment in Nigeria.
Yes, we did.
Because there was clearly trends in emerging markets. And when I say emerging markets, not just like developing countries, but like new countries that are doing open source and doing it well. So that was also part of some of the work you did under
That
the CEO?
was I think that is actually how I got my job.
Yeah.
Because I was always I'm a Nigerian American, and I go to Nigeria very often, and Nigeria has so many people, and I met so many intelligent people. And then it's also like, if I believe I'm intelligent, then everybody else is like me is also intelligent. What are we doing? And so the best part about working on the data team at GitHub is you work on the data team at GitHub. You have all the data at your fingertips and you have production access, which means you can be a sleuth. You can just live in that data and be looking for things.
Yeah.
And that's what I used to do. And so I would write all these queries because I was just curious, who is doing what, where in the world?
Yeah.
So I would write all these queries because I wanted to see who was doing what. And I would slice data in multiple ways, trying to figure out, is the thing I'm thinking about my hypothesis, is it really being validated? Because I had all this crazy hypothesis. Like I'm one of those people that truly, truly deep down believes that technology is one of the best things that has ever occurred to humanity. And that if you give people true access to education and technology education in particular with capital in a permissionless way, we can actually change the world for the better.
Yeah.
So therefore, my whole goal was let us reduce the barriers to entries as much as we can. And data is a great signal. If a place is trending and people are doing stuff, let's go talk to them. Is there something that they need? Could we help them even get better? And so we went to Nigeria. I planned this Nigeria trip. GitHub had already been going to Nigeria because it was already trending.
Yeah.
And then I planned a GitHub Nigeria trip for the CEO, for Nat and his team. And we went there and we met a bunch of developers. And the best part is a lot of those developers did not know that each other existed.
Yes, this is true. And this is how Oscar got started.
Because I didn't know that
collaboration
existed. Yeah. And so our event was one of the first time they all met each other in the country.
Yeah.
They didn't have to go somewhere outside to see each other. And that was a very powerful thing. And the crazy thing is we would go to like a cafe. I remember we got in, went to this cafe for espresso, and Nat was like, oh no, snap. Like looking over someone's shoulder. This person is writing code and creating a pull request on GitHub.
In the cafe in Nigeria.
Yes, right there.
Yeah.
So you just see things like that. Everybody is trying to be a developer of some kind or the other. People are using these tools. It made a lot of sense to go over there and go talk to them and see what tools do they actually truly need. Is there anything that we're doing that's holding them back? And also, can they give us feedback on the paths we should take with the different kinds of products that we're going to launch? And one of the things that came out of that was that trending. Like, you need to improve this thing to be country specific.
Yeah. It's amazing because even like the Made in Nigeria, I forgot his
campaign.
Adewale. Sorry, I'm like butchering your name. I'm so sorry.
Adewale.
Yes. He built this Made in Nigeria, which is all projects open source made in Nigeria so they could showcase stuff. And that was one of the projects that also started trending after it shipped like 2019, 2020. And the one thing that I noticed, because we did work with the Black to Cats at GitHub. So on the tails of this trip, we held a hackathon, Code Nija. We had Black to Cats in country doing an open source hackathon. So by having all these like sequitur events that happen, this connection, now you see like Shedrack, you see Samson Gotti, you see a lot of folks like
they blew it up.
Yeah, they're all coming and they're participating in like the Linux Foundation events and projects. And now you have Chaos Africa, which now has a community across country, across continent, to be able to participate and have in-country events, but in multiple countries. And I got to see it firsthand of like, I got to meet everybody. The first time in Nigeria was a couple months ago for me. We got to also see that sort of momentum. But I think when you make that investment, you can sort of, it's not about reaping the benefits, but it's like sort of stepping back and watching like the impact that makes. And I don't know if you know about this, but Figma also did a very similar tour.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Nice.
So Dylan, the CEO of Figma, went to Nigeria as well. And the result of that is there are so many new product designers that came out of that.
That is one of the things I've started to notice. I see this thing on Twitter all the time, on X, all the time.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's true, but a lot of people truly believe that some of the best designers are in Nigeria.
Yeah. Wow.
They feel like they have a certain kind of flair that is better than anybody's eye. So people believe that. And maybe all of that is why Dylan went, or maybe that's because Dylan went, it can create,
Yeah.
I don't know, but some designer stuff is happening down there.
But I will say that the product designers are down there and growing up in this ecosystem using Figma. And I think the benefit
That
of
is
him
smart.
being there and talking to the folks and teaching them the basics of the tool, it is completely changed the generation. There's like, I want to write a blog post around how developer tool startups, they do the wrong thing where they focus on the experts and convince the experts at the big fangs to use your product, when the best thing you could do is go build college curriculum with your tool.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes.
Yeah, so like you build, and I think we had a conversation about this.
And I've been like acting it out. It's true. But you know, when people are sitting here in the valley, the average person you meet has like, most of my friends have PhDs because I have PhD, right?
Must be nice.
So no, but it gives you it's not nice because you have a very skewed view of the world.
Yes, correct.
Your view of the world does not scale. Most human beings are not going to get a PhD. So if you're listening to a bunch of research scientists doing ML as your feedback loop, you are toast. Those people do not know how to make products. They're great researchers. It's very, very different. So being intentional about truly creating a diverse ecosystem of people around you and listening to them to build a product is so important. I'm going to be going to Nigeria next week.
Okay, wow. You going back home, or you do work out there too as well?
So I want to work from Nigeria. I haven't been since the pandemic. My plan was always to go back every year and maybe even go for like 8 months, 12 weeks, like do like long stints of work. But the pandemic put a kibosh on that. And now that everything is open back up, I want to start going again. But I want to do like this first pass of what is the ecosystem like? Because one of the challenges that I noticed is a lot of people have moved out.
Yeah. Well, that's a challenge. I had this conversation a lot with folks, because when you get to learn the Figmas and you learn the GitHub and you get the connection to ecosystem, like Prosper being one of them, like he actually has a place now outside of Nigeria. So like, and that's where he spends the most of the time with his family, where he can grow and be established, because there is a disconnect. There's like almost 2 different economies building right now in Nigeria, where you have folks working for Western companies, and then you have folks who work in Nigeria. Yeah. And there's a huge disconnect between them.
Disconnect. So I want to go and see what that looks like now. And and I think of Nigeria as a place that sharpens your knives. You know, because you go there, you come back, you're just sharper. Your brain, it's just like, you need a fine tuning. And I think Lagos, for me, is my fine tuning. It just helps to like reset my brain. Like, don't take anything for granted. Hit the ground running, be smarter, it makes me better.
Yeah, 100%. And like, so you were talking about, you have a lot of friends who are doing PhDs, and sometimes it could be a detriment because everyone now is at a level that you can't understand. It's a sort of beginner mindset or sort of introductory mindset. Do you think that was the issue until OpenAI for ML and AI in particular? Because for me, nothing made sense until Copilot when it came to AI. I was like, oh, wow, this is actually really cool. What else can we do? And I expanded my palette to go try all these new tools and try to mess with ML data models. But I had no interest prior because I felt like it was just always above my weight. So did OpenAI basically just sort of break that chasm?
I think they did. They truly democratized access to AI for builders.
Yeah.
And I think OpenAI is not paying me. I think people truly vastly underestimate what has actually happened.
Yeah.
Because now prompt engineering, people, it's not engineering. But you can go and write sentences, queries in natural language, not in SQL, in natural language. You can write what you want your responses to be.
Yeah.
You can fit that to something. And if you don't know how to fit it into something, they will show you how to fit it into something. If it can do 100 of these, you can build a model that can then do something. So the barrier to entry now is the level of literacy.
Yeah.
If you can read and you can use a computer, you too can build a very sophisticated, state-of-the-art ML model. That is life-changing. And I think people just don't understand how powerful that is. You don't have to have a PhD. You don't even have to be technical. You have to be a human being, which already comes with preloaded problem-solving capacity. You just need to think up the thing and go do it.
Yeah, and it's like the concept that I've been learning with this fine tuning that OpenAI has been working on. I know other folks are building this as well, and there's other frameworks and tools. But I mean, my gateway right now is OpenAI until it's not. But there's the actual consumer prompt, but chat prompt. But then you have the system prompt.
Yeah.
So the system prompt is like the idea of, I want you to give me links of every restaurant that has a Michelin star in San Francisco, but I also want phone numbers. I want linkable, like clickable, and a markdown table that I can just like quickly ship over to my EA and say, okay, here's our bookable restaurants. Like that system prompt of like how I want it to be linked, to how I want it to be structured, or what charts I want is absolutely magical. Because like the thing that we're doing right now is kind of like what I saw at GitHub happening, like with the trending and seeing that sort of process. And GitHub is kind of like refocusing efforts, and they have their roadmap. But what I did is I taken open source outside to then do that trending, but expand it quite a bit. Because like we built this thing on the DevRel team, so we're 2 people for the longest time, and Don Goodman Wilson built this thing called Cerebro. And it was basically Looker on top of GitHub's data. And we would go into places like Brazil, which is another emerging market for GitHub, and identify top contributors in JavaScript, Python, etc. And then every time we did an event down there, we'd go reach out to those folks and say, hey, we're GitHub. We know you're doing great work because we have the data. Let's have a coffee chat. Let's do a meetup and a talk. And that was extremely powerful in like setting up shop for GitHub in Brazil and for Nigeria and for other Eastern European countries.
So that, being able to now do that, building Cerebro in 20 minutes.
Yes.
I think that is the change. It's not, I think it's so powerful because it's not just a consumer tool. You can use it as a consumer tool, but it's also a developer tool. And it happens to be a very good developer tool because the documentation is great.
Yeah.
So I think for all of us who are in the developer tooling market, you should actually study the go-to-market of OpenAI, because the developer tools are superlative. They never scare you. You always feel empowered that you could do something. And they give you so many examples. I think it's a shift. How it shifts, I don't know. And then, but the interesting thing is the definition of who's the developer also changes.
Yes.
And have you started seeing that in the data that you're looking at? Because does the developer actually have to be truly, truly super technical?
Yeah, I mean, my answer, no. Yeah.
They just have to build stuff that works using software. And what if now all the building happens often mostly in natural language?
Yeah. And this is something that what I really enjoyed when working under Nat, when he was CEO, is like we did reframe what the developer is. And as we started counting, like over 100 million developers on platform. But before I learned how to code professionally in 2013, I was writing scripts and doing jQuery. Was I a developer? Probably. But in my mind, pre-2013, when I was doing sales and had a finance degree, I was like, I know, I just do this on the side. And like, I run scripts to play my first person shooters and mod the game and stuff like that. But like, you're manipulating and developing some software to win in a game, like you're a developer.
You're a developer.
Or if you're a designer using Figma to convert CSS, like you're a developer. So like the scope has broadened. And I think there was always a sort of push and pull on like Stack Overflow's 15 million developers versus at the time GitHub's 50. It's like Stack Overflow thought a developer was this.
Very specific. Probably
Yes.
somebody that earned a living with a title called software engineer that worked for a company. That's not, that is a very specific idea of what a developer is. That's not what a developer is.
Yeah, it's the scope has broadened so much more. And now as we're introducing more prompt engineers, like it is a gateway into, well, what if I can go one layer deep? What if I knew what the Python was that was outputting this and take this back to the product I'm trying to build?
Yeah, and I think that is actually an amazing thing. It's not very often that you get to live in a world where your dreams come true. And for me, I feel like I'm living in a world where my dreams are coming true, because my dream ultimately has been, let us drastically reduce the barrier to entry to technical work. And we're seeing it happening in real time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going back to the thing you said, which is those who have the biggest data set in ML are the ones that win, and GitHub being the one that has the biggest data set. So I'm curious, what are other data sets that folks are, at least in this sort of developer tool ecosystem that we're looking at, that we might be also paying attention to pretty shortly?
I think it's actually kind of very hard to find one outside of GitHub.
Yeah.
So the GitHub covers any kind of programming language that is a language. But what you said about what developers do and all of that, what about all those things? Who is the best person? Who's the designer? So I think the scope of what you should look at is what are all the expertise roles needed to ship a product?
Yeah.
People who build, like, development is one kind of thing. It's not enough to ship a product. You need all this different, you need a designer. So where do those people sit? Where can you find the best? Where can you curate? I don't know. And then it's because of are they doing artifact management? Is there something like version control for images?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, all I know is image magic, which is not version control, but it's more of a manipulation of images. But I think there's a lot of opportunity there, because like you see, what is it, Midjourney is like the tool we use for all of our blog posts. We generate a Midjourney image, it goes as a social card, and like we now have a data set of like what prompts have we used previously to get what we're doing for the next image, for the next blog post. And like our brain is all word of mouth. Like how I learned how to code is like I asked the person next to me, what did you just run there? Tell me that. Like whenever you do a prompt in Midjourney, tell me that prompt, or let's share these prompts in a place that it's repeatable. And I think there's like this world that we're sort of like building, where we're building like this bigger brain or knowledge. And I think there's like, I'm curious your thought on this, the opposite end of the spectrum, where Twitter and Reddit have now locked down their data set because of the sort of consumption of all these new LLMs that are working. So do you see like a push and pull of like private data? Now we have our AI thing, Stack Overflow being another one that just launched they actually haven't launched. They just announced their Overflow AI.
I think everybody is realizing that, oh my God, data is truly king.
Yeah.
And maybe I've been giving my data away for free. And so I should lock it down, and then I should be the only one to benefit from that data set.
Yeah.
It's a rational thought. I think it's very short-sighted.
Really?
I think it's very short-sighted, because the best comes when you bring all of it together.
Yeah.
So if you just build like something that only works for Stack Overflow or only works for Twitter, now you're getting into this very specialty-based thing. And maybe you make money and then you're good, but you don't invent the future. The future is going to come from something that is way more interdisciplinary. And that's going to, so maybe they put a license on it and you can get access to that data. People need a way to get access to that data. If what they're talking about is, I need to figure out a way to benefit from giving you access to my data, then fine. But literally locking it down that only I get to use it is naive.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and I guess I'm curious, like, so we have OpenAI, well, we spent a lot of this conversation on, but then Facebook or Meta
has
launches
its own
their Llama V2, which is open source. It's licensed, interesting, but it's still, the community can train it, and we all can learn from using the Llama version. So does Meta win?
Meta is going to win in the long run because, number one, we're all using this ChatGPT and everybody's liking it and you're happy with it. Most enterprises, so like, let's take the usual average consumer out of the picture. Enterprise level consumers, companies who need to use this thing for something way more sophisticated. Many companies have challenges around using proprietary models. They are not as trustworthy. They don't feel safe. They want to use something that they can train themselves. And if they want to use something they can train themselves, the only thing they can use that they can train themselves is an open source model.
Yeah.
So they want an open source model that they can train, that they have they own that model, they can do this and that. It's part of their intellectual property. So open source models are not going away. They are so necessary in the context of enterprise. Average human being, then you use something that is commercially available. But like a huge corporation, they're probably not going to use this thing. They will want their own version of it. Maybe it's on-prem. They want their own in a private cloud. They want it to be, they literally want guardrails over everything.
Yeah.
So if OpenAI adopts a position where they do that, then maybe they can win. But you're going to need to be like, this is completely mine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see a world where OpenAI does expose a bit of maybe it's out of date models to the community to see what to bring their version up to the next. Yeah. I don't know if they win in a world where they're closed source forever. But I do see a space where.
But if they overtake it, if their role is now we're just a better version of search, we're a better version of doing some software, this and that, they will then form a market for themselves.
Yeah, they'll for sure figure it out. But the thing is, like, where GitHub won, so like defunct and co-founders of GitHub, they took an existing protocol, which was Git, and they built an interaction around that. Well, we all had like a centralized place of how we do version control, and we have a way we could take that step to, okay, now we can collaborate and have like this social coding, social graph experience. So I guess what I'm getting at is, like, when I look back at GitHub and like what were the sort of pillars that are even the stepping stones that made them be so successful and have the biggest data set, but also look at SourceForge, which was like the exact opposite, where it was like way more closed and like a different business model that didn't quite scale as the world shifted away from ads. I think it's the same thing for Meta, where Meta is willing to take chances. Like their CEO is fighting other CEOs. So like literally physically fighting other CEOs, but
then also their CEO is a technical CEO.
Yeah,
he's a technical founder CEO. So the same person that founded the company is still steering the company.
Yeah,
and that person is very technical.
Yeah,
and that person is also very business savvy. So they can learn from the history of the past.
Yeah,
open always wins. You just need to give people a collaboration layer and a way of doing discovery.
Yeah,
and then let's write better licenses over the things we create, so that if there's a commercial application for it, you can still use it for commercial application, but figure out some other kind of thing that you need to put around it.
Yeah. So in the area that Fimio is in around the data layer, and like we're now seeing in a world where like there's like the democratization of data, but then there's like the data that you own and protect, like your sort of personal identifiable information. Is there a world where I'm signing up? I guess this was like the blockchain or Web3, you sign up, you're part of the ecosystem, but you're able to take your keys home.
There is. And this is why we started off in Web3. So what really, really interested me in even founding Fimio was open source.
Yeah.
That's the thing that I really get excited about. And one of the things I realized that we needed more in open source was a way of actually doing coordination around organization. Who gets to do what? Like, just who is the maintainer of this thing? Is this person compensated? Are they okay? Are they happy? Do they have like extra people that can help them? If I'm really using this, I don't want to wake up one day and then this person has decided, you know what, I quit. I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. And so then for me, Web3 just was like, oh my God, this is the next evolution of open source, because now you can have a DAO, a distributed autonomous organization, an organizational framework that you can then slap on top of a project. And so you can then have some kind of at least governance around this. Like, who owns what? Who gets to triage an issue? Who gets to review this? You can codify it in a way and then have it run through code. Have the thing and then make sure that the things that you all decide is immutable and it's all transparent. So it's permissionless, it's immutable, it's transparent. That idea got hijacked by scammers for coins and stuff like that. And so when people think about it, all they think about is like, oh, scammy coins. But the infrastructure and the governance mechanism is very, very powerful. And so I'm beginning to start thinking about all of this stuff. We need a way, and this is what Fimio is going to be doing, to bring that to data, because it's about, you need some kind of fingerprinting of some kind of trace of ownership in a very complex ecosystem. A blockchain allows you to do that. If the blockchain is open and it's immutable, you can do that. But you need something that is privacy preserving. Maybe you don't want everybody to see. But these are very sophisticated ideas, and we want to play around with it to see if they scale.
Yeah.
Do they actually truly scale? Or are they going to fall apart at the end?
Yeah, and this is something that I don't know if it's just similar to like what we're seeing with this Fediverse, Blue Sky, and now Jack Dorsey's like Web5 block thing that they're working on. I only know from Angie Jones, she's done some couple presentations, and I've watched a couple of demos of like what I explained, you get to take your keys if you want to move them here, or if you move them there, like you're able to like remove yourself from the system if you choose, but you could also be part of the system and the sort of the Borg of the learning.
So it's like that. And we already, to a certain extent, use that because Git is open.
Yeah.
Git is a tree. It is a ledger. It is a tree. And it's a historical record of everything. So in a way, it's kind of immutable because you can see the trace of everything. So it doesn't mean that you can't roll something back, but it's kind of hard to tear that tree apart. You can see everything that has occurred in that tree, and then it scales. And if you decide you don't actually want to use GitHub as the coordination layer and all that, you could still use Git. You could just spin up your own server and do it. The average person does not. But if you wanted to, you could just take your stuff and then go spin up your own server and then build all the tools around it yourself. Blue Sky and all those things, they're based on protocols. They're based on these things, and you can just take your keys with you. If you don't want to sign into this server, you can sign into another server, and all your followers and everything goes with you. The challenge is key management. The average person doesn't really understand encryption and how do I keep my private keys and all this stuff. So we have to build better UI, UX around that to make it trivial.
Yeah.
If you're a developer who does backend development, you do this all the time. We SSH into a EC2 instance on Amazon. The only way that it knows it is us, because you need trust.
Yeah.
We have a PEM file. It has a public-private key. We do the handshake. Oh, yes, it's actually you. You can, but we need to do that in a way that is so trivial that nobody has to be having RSA encrypted. Like, you don't need to even know. It just needs to work. And we're going to have to figure out how to do that very, very well around data. And to have this fingerprint along with the data, so that wherever the data goes, you know that this is actually your data, my data, their data, so that we can figure out how to do profit sharing. Because ultimately, that's going to be what it comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is something that, so like the GitHub CLI, when it was being developed and launched, there's one command, which is GH off, and it does that handshake for you. It's not perfect, and sometimes it gets it wrong. You have to overwrite files, but like to save your, at least your SSH key, to be able to push up to the Git server, that is trivial. And for years, it was always a thing I had to go Google or look at
How do I do this again?
And it is sort of like developers can figure this out and understand how to go the way to it. The consumer, or the average consumer, is not going to.
So we have to bring encryption tooling down to the consumer level. It already exists. We know it exists. We use it all the time. It works. But it's a developer tool, and it's not even a great developer tool. Because everybody still has to go, like, there's always a fear, like, is this thing the public one or the private one that I just exposed? There's always some anxiety, like, oh, I can't remember. Then you have to, like, go back to your notes and be like, okay, I did this, I did that. We need to bring that down to the consumer level. So once we do that, bring it down to the consumer level. And there are many people probably working in this already, I'm assuming, I hope. And if not, well, we will. But once you bring that down, then how do you tie that to your data? And what does it mean to actually be your data? Is it a data that you have to, do we put something on top of your browser that before you even log in, you have to do the handshake so that everything that flows out has your fingerprint? So these are the things I'm beginning to think about in a very clear way of how does this become a product that is not invasive, that everybody can use?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was gonna make a tongue-in-cheek joke, but I missed the opportunity, where when I used to explain GitHub pre-Microsoft, I used to joke that we're a collaboration tool built in an open source blockchain protocol, which was Git. So there's a lot of nuance within Git and a lot of like that similarity to what the blockchain is or what blockchains are, that I think gets missed a lot of times.
Oh, it's so missed. I gave a talk at Go to Chicago where I actually like tore it apart about what's the difference. It's like 5 separate things that it must have. Immutable, distributed, permissionless, because it may not be distributed. It has to be permissionless. So there are like all these different things that must exist. And when all of those things can exist in tandem, then you have a system that is truly like trust certified, and you can't pretend to be not who you are. Because at the end of the day, it's about trust. We need to figure out how to solve trust at scale. And today, the way we do it is your browser does it for you. It tells you like, oh, the certificate. We still issue certificates, but the average consumer does not know anything about a certificate. But there's a certificate on every computer, and it's stored in somewhere. And then when you log in, the browser does, the certificate for this website, this is it's not certified, and it gives you that warning. It's like, don't move forward. I think they may be scamming you. So we do it all the time. but we need to do it in a way around data. All this tooling that we're talking about was not designed for data transmission, like for data as an asset.
Yeah.
It was just like communication protocols or something. But no, now we want to do it around like literally data as an asset. And that's why I'm interested in the whole idea of, I'm thinking about maybe a very good use case or a place to play around with is product designers, because they actually have data artifacts.
Okay. Well, what do you mean by that?
Their job is to create little bits and pictures of things. So, and at least the human can recognize.
Yeah.
You can see the thing, because data is such an ephemeral idea. It's hard to figure out what is data.
Yeah, this is fascinating. There's a lot. We're excited to see what comes out of Fimio, because I think you're onto something. And as far as like these data sets, and for folks who owns the data is king at this point. And I think a lot of companies, incumbents are well aware of that. And I see like where years ago we saw like Foursquare, where you check into a coffee shop and then that data was then added to the sort of infrastructure of Foursquare, which I think, is Foursquare still around?
Yes, it is. I am a loyal user.
Okay.
It has broken up into two separate things.
Okay.
They're not paying me. It's Foursquare and Swarm.
Yes.
And I still use it religiously, especially when I travel, because I'm tuning it to my taste. So if I land in some country I do not know, it already has my history. I always need to know, where am I going for coffee and what restaurants am I going to? I want somebody to solve that for me. And I use it for that.
Wow. And that data layer that's obviously people are still using is super valuable, especially country by country, city by city, but business to business. And I think the one thing I'm super fascinated about this new trend in AI is like we're actually learning how to classify interactions to do proper recommendations. So like the one thing I did want to talk about in this sort of trend the last 10 years, we saw where it was all user generated data. And then we had algorithmic data. So like things like the home feed on X. And then now we're moving into AI generated data, where we had to do the steps forward to get where we are today. And we could always go back to the cycle of like, okay, user generated, AI generated, algorithmic generated, but then AI that feeds to everything. So do you feel like have we hit the sort of, not synergy, but like singularity?
No, we're not. So right now in the ML AI world, everybody's excited about foundational models. Yeah. The foundational models itself and their capabilities. Oh, this model has 1 billion parameters. It can do this, it can do that. Yes, it is. It is very powerful. But for that thing to truly become effective, it needs to be put in applications. Yeah. Truly cutting edge applications are few and far between. What I see is copycats. Everybody has their agent, their little AI assistant. AI assistance is just one avenue of this. So I don't think we've not even reached the singularity at all. Like we're not even nowhere near it. And then what we're talking about is only in the realm of language. And that's it, only in the realm of language. It's not even fully giving you full-on reasoning capacity. It's just language, and it's very good at problem solving, but it's language. Most of human intelligence is not limited to language. Wow. Vision. What about vision? What about vision is a hard one. We still don't have full self-driving cars, like full self-driving. It's very, very complex problem. And it's not about language. Yeah. It's about problem solving in a complex world, dynamic, changing, adaptive world. It has nothing to do with me talking to the car and this and that. Humans do so much in the subconscious. And that's because we do so much subconsciously, most of us are not aware of how truly staggeringly powerful human problem solving is. Yeah. How many people, I am certain there have been so many humans who have had experiences of maybe something hijacks your consciousness. And you're not drunk, but maybe something exciting or something just hijacks your consciousness. And you find yourself, you've driven home and you can't even remember how. And you're just like, oh, snap, I wasn't even thinking about. But somehow, you drove home on autopilot while your mind was thinking about something else. You'd even like, that is hard. Yeah. These systems can't do that.
Yeah, and there's still a ton of work to do.
There's so much work to do. I'm very excited about all the things we've hacked with speech and language. Yeah. But there's a whole world of all the things that need to be done.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the stuff that folks are doing in computer vision and like things like video, like not just generating video, but reading and understanding and comprehending. So I know a couple of folks who I've chatted with around the open source ecosystem that are working on that in particular. And yeah, I think there's just a lot that's going to go in this sort of area of the industry. And I don't think we're nowhere even close to being done.
Oh, no, we're nowhere. There's still a lot more work, or even fully mapping out the pathways that humans human themselves. Like, you know, how I eat this and it affects this and it affects that. All of those are like, we're nowhere near that.
Cool. Well, Omoju, thanks so much for the conversation. I'm like super excited about everything you're working on and this whole arena. So I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation offline. And I'll have to share some stuff that we're working on open source too as well, because I think I would love your feedback on it.
All right. Thank you for inviting me, and we stay saucy.
I think we should end on that.